Metamorphosis, a biological process of nature in which an animal physically develops, involving conspicuous and relatively abrupt changes to its body structure. This process, when found within nature, allows animals, insects, and other organisms to adapt for the next stage in their life, and ultimately adapt to more versatile conditions. However, when twisted and perverted by darkness, this process saw the opportunity to take something already immensely deadly and contagious and turn it into a fierce guardian of dark secrets. They continue to grow, even after death. The HazmatFTW, the Guardians, the shock troops of the Sculptor, or the Armoreds, as the hunters of Louisiana came to name them, were among some of the fiercest of the Sculptor's creations. Encapsulated by a thick chitinous casing resistant to small caliber bullets, shielding the creature specifically from gunfire, the Armoreds were a direct response and counter to the hunters and their armed presence within the corrupted areas. However, where one might think the thick casing encapsulating the creature was for its own protection, it would seem that wasn't the case. Tough, durable, and relentless, these vicious guards of darkness would linger behind doors, close to doorways, and in other choke points in the vicinity of the rifts that merged our realm with the Sculptors. The Armored's one and only purpose was to defend or dissuade hunters from gaining access to the rifts, the powerful portals booming with dark energy that connected our world with the Sculptors. While unmatched in terms of its own physical protection, it didn't take long for the hunters of Louisiana to find this creature's particular weakness: fire and slashing weapons. The thick chitinous structure would ignite like dry grass, its fibers of wood-like tissue screaming in almost instant consumption once flames would touch its surface. And if examined upon death, one could within its ashes or deteriorated remains be able to find the same kind of black maggots similar to what existed within the grunts. Unfortunately, while the theories are many, very little is known about the actual origin of the Armoreds. Its origin could indeed be one of the most concealed among the Sculptor's secrets. Many researchers have speculated, but very little evidence has come to light. Dr. Winkler, one of the many researchers that ventured into the bayous to catalog the creatures of the Sculptor, hypothesized that the Armoreds were nothing more than grunts encased within a protective shell. Harold Black, also known as the researcher, would prove this hypothesis wrong, as he, upon close inspection of an Armored, discovered a third and slender arm growing within the shell of the creature. It would seem that the Armored had undergone holo or hemimetaboly, an either complete or partial metamorphosis to create this chitinous shell, as well as a claw or fang meant to be used solely for dispatching prey. But that begs the question, what were they to begin with? Grunts? Or perhaps something else? An even more troubling question was, who or what was responsible for this metamorphosis? Was it the arachnid terror known as the spider, or perhaps something else that is yet to be documented or even considered? It's commonly believed that the grunts, though cursed and under the control of the Sculptor, still had their souls intact, meaning that beneath the rotting skin and decaying flesh, the person which once freely inhabited their own body was still aware of both their actions and their suffering, trapped within this walking husk, a prison for their mind and soul. According to Dr. Winkler, the Armored, being trapped and encased by darkness, might be the result of a grunt suffering an even more twisted fate at the hands of the corruption. However, where he and other researchers saw the effects of the corruption as an infection or a disease, something that once transmitted would potentially be irreversible, Scognamiglio, one of the most cited researchers of the Sculptor and its creatures, had a different theory. Scognamiglio didn't see the corruption as only infection, but viewed it rather as an influential effect on a person's very being. He suggested that will, or determination, what was ultimately decided one's destiny, while the corruption in its essence was poison, a toxic effect deteriorating the population within the bios. It may have been, according to Scognamiglio at least, that the toxic deterioration was mental rather than physical. The duration it took for one individual to succumb to the Sculptor and its influence has varied severely and allegedly depended on many factors such as proximity to the source and severity of exposure. One thing that Scognamiglio would argue was that one's willpower and fortitude would dictate the duration of this process. Based on several accounts, we can speculate that while some people had the ability to resist and delay the corrupting touch of the Sculptor, most of them would eventually give in to the crippling despair, insanity, and anxiety, and become grunts, bound in darkness, servants of the Sculptor. But it would seem that there were some who were not only able to resist corruption, but outright reject it, refusing to give in to the Sculptor's influence. However, though admirable and fascinating on a case-by-case basis, the fate of these tenacious individuals would eventually lead down the same road altogether, as Scognamiglio suspected that the sheer iron will of these people might have triggered another phenomenon. As he himself stated in his writings, the raw virtues and sins of those who are made armored, indomitable will that in death catalyzes their petrifaction, a curse and a blessing, for the hardened chitin is at the mercy of her own hellfire. While his conclusion of what actually causes the creation of the Sculptor's sentinels is vague at best, and while the process of how an individual would go from regular human to an armored sentinel of darkness is unknown to us, we can still, based on current knowledge, speculate on their creation. If the Sculptor couldn't bind these stern and determined individuals to its will through its own influence, perhaps it could trap them instead. The essence of the corruption was spread through the hives and their relentless armies of bees, and upon closer inspection of the armoreds in both their early and final stages, we see a close relation between its tissue with that of beehives and the hive structures themselves. It might have been so that the hives are closer and play a larger role in the creation of the armoreds than we originally suspected. Restrained physically by something and contained within a prison rooted in place, bound by this chitinous casing created by the corrupted bees of the hives, the Sculptor's victims would slowly starve until death would ultimately come for them, and finally the subject would be forced into serving the realm of darkness, guarding its secrets as obedient sentinels. Hey there, Hazmat here. And that concludes the story of the Armoreds, which might be the most bare bones of the creatures within the lore. Still, I hope you enjoyed it. As always, a big thanks goes out to the Hunters Lounge on Patreon, specifically Johnny Sevens, Jiminel Bob, Corey Peterson, Derivative, Ryan, Goose, Doc Powell, Ham Bone, Gino Lucero, Slip, Stas Biestek, The Wizard of Copper, Bubonic MCCC, Eli the Great, Gabe Benavides, Ghosty, Jane Doe, Jose Gonzalez, Kashi Yuka, Nightingale Far, Raven, Sir Bottoms, Spooks, The Loaf of Bread, Tim Wright, Tom Hengst, Wolfie Elström, and Wildcard. The Hunters Lounge does not only support me directly as a content creator, they also help me decide on future content, and you can join it for as little as a single dollar a month. Link is in the description below. And thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.